Thanks, Richard. I'm going to try and head through things pretty quickly, but in the meantime, I'm just going to actually hand out a little kit which I'm going to be talking about in some detail later on, and people can, if you just pass it around, and I do need it back at the end because it's kind of useful for this kind of purpose, but gives you a feel for what one of the types of naloxone is that I'm going to be talking about. So basically, just quickly to rehash what an opioid overdose is. Basically, opioids bind to receptor sites in the brain. Some of them relate to the respiratory control centre. Basically, when they're in there, they block the ability of the body to detect carbon dioxide levels. And what that leads to is these raised carbon dioxide levels and lower oxygen levels. And this leads to an acidosis that affects various vital organs and eventually results in lowered blood pressure, low or absent consciousness, and a lowered cough or gag reflex. And ultimately, this respiratory suppression or ultimately can lead to respiratory arrest and then on to cardiac arrest and death, which is which is obviously a major consequence of opioid use that it's not surprising that people are most concerned with. And so, as Robert pointed out, consistently people who use opioids, people who inject drugs, regard overdose as the thing that most concerns them. Naloxone has been around for a long time. This is an old formulation that was available, made by CSL here. And basically this is an old form of a pre-filled syringe. It's a little bit technical to use, but it was used by the ambulance service right through to when newer formulations became available. And these are some of the ones that are out there, and you've got one circulating now, which I'll come and talk to in some detail, but you can see that there's a variety of different forms out there. I'll cover some of those now. The main one that we think of when we think of the Australian context is the minijet made by UCB. It's a 400 microgram dose, which is a relatively low dose of naloxone. It's simple, easy to use, but it's not fit for purpose for take-home naloxone programs. So take-home naloxone programs, I don't think I need to talk to the people in this audience about what they are, but the UCB minijet isn't fit for purpose. It doesn't have proper instructions. It doesn't come with needles. It doesn't come packaged properly. And, it's kind of reasonably bulky in its own little boxes and so forth. So it's not particularly ideal. There's only 400 micrograms in 1 mil available at the moment. I've actually got one here. I'm happy for that to circulate around as well. It was PBS listed in 2013, which was pretty exciting for us. So when we established the take-home naloxone program in the ACT, we originally had ampules, and I'll come back to ampules in a minute. And when the minijet was PBS listed, we swapped immediately to the minijet, because even though it's not fit for purpose, it's still a lot easier to use than ampules. The great thing that we have spoken about in the sector has been that it's been available over the counter since early 2016 under the S3 provisions. However, those of you who are in the sector will know that it was delisted from the PBS in June 2016. It was the main reason for that was ultimately it was the imminent sale by UCB to another manufacturer. There was a few other kind of complications around it. The TGA weren't particularly happy with UCB, shall we say. And in the end, it was delisted from the PBS. And finally, last Thursday, the new manufacturer has been revealed. So it's Amphastar, who are a US company that do manufacture a variety of pre-filled products, but now they'll need to apply for a licence transfer, and my understanding is that that's not a particularly straightforward process, and so we don't actually know how long it'll take before these 400 microgram mini-jets, if they get pursued by Amphastar in the Australian context, if they, there's a lot of uncertainty around these 400 microgram mini-jets. There is some existing stock out there. It expires in February 2017, which is creeping up very quickly, and it'd be inappropriate to be dispensing this from sort of October onwards. My understanding is that there's none left at UCB itself or any of the major wholesalers out there, but there are. What that means is that there is a lot on pharmacist shelves, because a lot went out just as things were closing down at UCB. And my communications with UCB are that if it's actually on the pharmacist's shelf, UCB will give a 100% rebate to the pharmacist who dispenses it. So as a consequence, it's effectively free for the actual cost of the wholesaler price. So any dispensing fee and things like that that a pharmacist may charge will still be on top of that. But at the moment, it's essentially free if there's stock available. But, I don't know how many of you know of pharmacists who actually have it on their shelves. I know of a few who do, but then there's others who did have it who no longer have it and so forth. So we really don't have, it's not a viable option at the moment, I think, to be thinking about the UCB one. So in the end, what we have is we're having to return to ampules. So the Hospira ampules come in packs of 5. There's other competitor ampules out there. I understand Febra having packs of 10 at the moment. And here's some photographs put together by Chris Goff from Karma up in the ACT about how to use an ampule. It's basically pretty straightforward, but it's less than ideal. One of the things we found in the ACT program when we had ampules originally is that people would often cut themselves while trying to open them, and also breakages and things like that. So it's less than ideal. So when the problem with the minijet was emerging, we sort of started looking around for alternatives that might be available, and there is this thing called the Carpuject, which is used in the US, and it's a 400 microgram pre-filled syringe. Comes in packs of 10 like this, and you can see, like a pack of 10 is a lot. And then you have this plunger for attachment, and this is what the plunger looks like. And then what you're supposed to do with this cumbersome thing is attach it. And you can see that it's each 400 microgram dose is a really big thing. Look at the size of the 400 microgram needle and syringe and the plunger relative to that person's hands. And it's pretty clunky, hard to use. I don't think it's certainly not fit for purpose. And Hospira, who also make the Carpuject, put in an S19 application to the TGA, which is a mechanism of bringing in medication from overseas under the provisions of something else that's no longer available, like the minijet. But they got feedback from the TGA and for some reason chose not to proceed, and we don't actually know why. I've tried following up with Hospira and they've been silent since notifying me that their application didn't proceed. So the Carpuject is off the agenda. It looked like it was something that was going to be available a few weeks ago. There's alternative devices that have been developed in the US. So there's this Evzio autoinjector. It's a pretty neat device. If you get a chance, look at it on the internet. It is totally fit for purpose. It's actually designed for take-home naloxone programs. It's only a single 400 microgram dose though, so again it's a pretty low dose, but it has these audio instructions on it. So you basically start the process and it tells you how to actually go about administering it. It's sold in pairs, so you essentially get 800 micrograms and then a trainer device as well, so that you can actually play around with this trainer so that you know how to use it. However, it's $3,700 and that's probably rules it out for the PBS. I think that it's going for as little as $500 in the US in some parts, but $3,700 would certainly not be, the PBS wouldn't accept it. So what's out there that's also fit for purpose, that's Also potentially useful in the context of us not having the UCB minijet anymore, I think, is this Prenoxad pre-filled syringe. It's been developed in the UK. It's totally fit for purpose. It's 2 milligrams of naloxone with 400 microgram markings, so it's essentially got 5 doses on it, and you'll see the markings on the side. Importantly, it comes packed fit for purpose, so the written instructions, which I think are less than ideal, should I say, are actually included in the packaging, along with 2 needles. And it comes in this container that immediately allows for disposal, and it's also relatively cheap. So I think the estimated cost is something like 15 to 20 pounds, so something like 30 Australian dollars, which is much cheaper than the UCB minijet in terms of costing to the PBS or programs. And I should point out that particular one that you have there has been opened, and so it actually comes wrapped in plastic, and you have to actually break the plastic, so it is got a tamper-proof outer wrapping on it. It's essentially the formulation of choice that's being used in the UK and Scotland and Ireland and Wales, and there's people exploring options around this in Australia at the moment. It'd be great to be able to get this out here quickly, and there's work going on in the background around that. People keep asking me about intranasal naloxone, given that I've been involved in this in the past. We trialled it in the Melbourne Ambulance Service. It's implemented in take-home programs across parts of the USA. There's a question mark, though, over early formulations. So, for example, this is one photograph taken from a US program where they're administering 2 milligrams of naloxone in 2 mils of fluid, which is far too much fluid to squirt up someone's nose. Basically, there's a lot of wastage if you do that. Even with those mucosal atomizer devices that are put on the end of it, if you spray 2 mil of fluid up someone's nose, you'll lose a lot of the naloxone. So you need something more concentrated, and this is highlighted in this slide here. So this is the pharmacokinetics of intramuscular naloxone against intravenous naloxone, and this is intranasal naloxone, and basically you can see that you get much less absorption, so it's only sort of 4% bioavailability in this form, when the intranasal naloxone was 2 milligrams in 5 mil, so very weak concentration, a lot of wastage. But what's happened since this time is that the US government, through the National Institutes of Health, basically sponsored a company called Adapt Pharma to develop up a fit-for-purpose device. And this one is effective. It's 4 milligrams, and that makes it technically the equivalent of 2 milligrams intramuscular. And here's the pharmacokinetic chart for, basically 400 microgram naloxone injection via intramuscular versus their pharmacokinetics in using the 4 milligram one. So you can see that if you have a really concentrated one that's designed for administration, you actually get good bioabsorption. But we don't actually know whether or not this is actually appropriate in the take-home naloxone setting. A 2 milligram dose really quickly intramuscularly is probably a pretty high dose, and there hasn't actually been any formal exploration of whether or not this is appropriate in a take-home naloxone setting. So where are we at? This is the Guild the Pharmacy Guild put together a overdose card, essentially, to go out with over-the-counter naloxone, and this is what it looked like. At the moment, it used to have basically just a single side that said how to administer a minijet. Now we've modified it so that it accompanies both, so it can accommodate both minijets and ampules, so instructions on how to use ampules as well, because at the moment, really, the only choice we have is to use ampules until someone comes up with something better. But then finally, the big thing we're going to need to answer over the next little while is what sort of dose is needed. So once we start to get these pre-filled syringes and fit-for-purpose devices coming in, we just need to work out what's the appropriate dose. And Ambulance Victoria still administers 2 milligrams at every opioid overdose, and the reality is that most people that get those 2 milligrams don't come up fighting or anything like that. They generally come through pretty well. Most people, though, would argue for something like an 800 microgram dose. But one of the things we really do need to be mindful of is the emergence of these new opioid formulations that are out there at the moment. There's a big investigation into a lot of what appear to be fentanyl-related overdoses and deaths that we would need higher concentrations of, higher amounts of naloxone to reverse. So at the moment, we don't really know what the future is going to hold. I mean, we've got ampules. We've got some mini-jets out there. We need better fit-for-purpose devices like the Prenoxad device, or alternatively the nasal spray that's been developed in the US. And there's a number of groups who are actively exploring how we can actually improve the situation. Thank you.